A few months ago, when I was knee-deep in my research on Jamie Osuna, I was on the phone with an attorney, patiently trying to figure out how I could get Jamie's juvenile record unsealed. That's when my phone beeped. I had another call coming in. It was a woman I knew from a local animal shelter. She was in a bit of a pickle. It was Friday, almost the end of the workday, and someone had dropped off a sick, flea, tick, and worm-ridden puppy that was just about 5 weeks old. Certainly not old enough to be away from its mother, and with the puppy's current state, she pretty much wouldn't have a shot at survival staying at the animal shelter, especially with employees getting ready to head out for the weekend. So the woman wondered if I might be willing to foster the puppy, and without really thinking about it, I said yes. I had 2 rescue dogs at home already, so I thought I could do this. But it wasn't that simple. The puppy was sicker than I thought, and no matter what I or any veterinarian did, it seemed she wasn't getting any better. A week after I first took her in, I tearfully called my boss and said I couldn't make it into work. I was sure she was dying, and it took a toll on me in a way that surprised me. Normally a pretty composed person, that day I was hysterical. I brought the puppy to the emergency animal hospital thinking she was too far gone. And honestly, I felt bad for myself. I'd tried to do a good deed, and it seemed it wasn't going to work out. I was emotionally drained. The vet told me to go home, and they'd call me in a few hours to let me know if the puppy would pull through. So I sulked out of the exam room, my eyes swollen and red. Why me, I thought. I was almost out the door when I heard someone say, "Olivia?" I turned around and saw Yvette Peña's sister sitting there in the waiting room, holding her badly injured little dog who'd been attacked in her backyard by a hawk of all things. This was life reminding me, you have no reason to feel bad for yourself. I looked at Danielle, Yvette's sister, holding her beloved pet that had nearly been dinner for a bird of prey. And this situation was nothing, totally incomparable to the other pain life had thrown at her. It'd been 2 years since I'd been in a courtroom with Danielle and the rest of Yvette Peña's family, who watched as Jamie Osuna grinned and chuckled when the judge asked if he admitted the allegation that he, Jamie Osuna, had tortured Yvette Peña as he slowly killed her. And now, at the animal emergency hospital, Yvette's sister saw how distraught I was and came to comfort me, as if I was the one who'd had it rough. I share this story because it's the best way I can explain Yvette's sister. She's been through hell and back, but she's never let her grief, her loss, or Jamie Osuna harden her. She's kept her deep compassion and nurturing nature most people never have. Oh, and by the way, both of our dogs ended up being okay, and I officially adopted the puppy. Anyway, Yvette Peña's sister was the only one who could tell a very important part of this story. That without, I truly don't think we could do this podcast. It just wouldn't feel right. I think you'll know what I mean after you hear it. I'm Olivia LaVoice. This is The Man with 1,000 Faces. How are you feeling?
Really nervous.
Over the years, I've spoken with Yvette's little sister Danielle quite a bit, but this is the first time she's agreed to sit down and do a recorded interview. She's had a lot of good reasons to turn me down in the past.
Since her death, it's very rare that it's who she was. It's more of an interest of what happened, how she knew Osuna. Not often do people ask, who was she? What was she to you? It's always just from the day we found out she was dead and forward. You know, what happened in court, but there's so much more. 36 years prior.
Now, she's never explicitly said that that was a reason for not wanting to talk to reporters, but I think to myself, how could it not be? The most that's been reported about Yvette Peña, really, is that she was 36 years old, had 6 children, and at the time of her death, she was living with a drug habit in a seedy motel. It's really easy for people, reporters included, to think, well, those are the facts. So this isn't just about honoring a victim's memory. This is about telling the whole story. Yvette's story. The story that's needed to be told for many years. This is Yvette's sister, Danielle.
She named me after her doll. I just remember when I was younger, always looking up to her, and she was so beautiful in the way she'd do her hair and her makeup, and I'd always want to go everywhere with her. Any chance I could be near her, I was.
The sisters were 10 years apart, and though Yvette was just a kid herself when Danielle was born, she took on a very mature role for her baby sister.
My mom worked at a bar, so my sister put me to bed. My sister bathed me, she cooked for me, and she took care of me. I don't even remember my mom. It was just me and my sister. I remember one Christmas, these little mechanical toy dolls were the craze. They were go-go and yo-yo, and you'd walk them, and they were battery-powered, and they'd walk. And I remember wanting one so bad.
Yvette, just a teenager, took extra hours at work to make sure the toy was under the tree for her baby sister.
Christmas Day was the first gift I opened. After that, I didn't even care about anything else.
Yvette was very focused on caring for her little sister, but inside she was struggling. See, life had never been easy. Their mother was just 15 years old when she gave birth to Yvette. Later, Danielle says medical testing revealed their mother had the mental capacity of a 9-year-old. They were poor, and life was perhaps always a little unstable. But soon after Danielle was born, life in their home took a dark turn.
You talked about her being a mother figure. She was more than that. She was my protector. And, it's strange because I actually just, within the last several months, started opening up and sharing this part of our story. And it ties into the guilt that I have for her death. I know it's not my fault. I know that there's nothing that I could have done, but I feel partially to blame because of where she was at in her life and because of her addiction and how it led her to live in the El Morocco Motel. A few months after I was born, I was hospitalized. And I wasn't supposed to survive. And I was baptized in the hospital, and I was read my last rites because they thought that I was going to die. And my mom, when she had me, was dating a drug dealer who was very good at his job and made quite a bit of money off of it. And he was able to provide for her and provide for my sister and to provide for me to the extent that I got better and I was going to survive, but I was still needing to be monitored. I was on machines, and the machines were able to be inside of our home because he paid whatever cost it was to bring them into the home. I was a newborn. My sister was 10. And part of the cost to have the machines in the home wasn't only a financial cost. It turned into being the cost of my sister's innocence. My mom's boyfriend began sexually abusing her and would threaten that if she didn't allow him, then he wasn't going to continue to pay for my machines to keep me alive. And if she didn't allow him to do it to her, then he would do it to me. So at 10 years old, she allowed it and kept his secret. And it went on for 2 years until she was 12 and I was 2. She had finally had enough and she spoke up. And during his arrest and his court stuff and gathering evidence and the medical stuff, the medical examiner or the doctor who examined her, he asked my mom if he could examine me. And upon his examination, he found out that I had been abused as well. And upon learning that, my sister lost herself at the age of 12, attempted suicide multiple times. Talking to her about it when we were older, she just felt that she didn't protect me like she thought she was. And had she spoken up sooner, maybe it wouldn't have happened to me. My mom never got my sister the help that I think she needed, the counseling or therapy, or it was just kind of, it's over and done with. Drop it, leave it alone. And eventually, she started self-medicating. She turned to alcohol and then marijuana, and then from marijuana to whatever else.
I tried to find the man Danielle said was her mother's boyfriend. This is it. It proved to be difficult, despite his being a registered sex offender with an address listed on the Megan's Law website. I went to that address. I saw someone come out. Turn it up. Hello? The man who answered the door said he was the brother of the man I was looking for. He said his brother didn't live with him and didn't know where I could find him or how I could reach him. The brother recalled the molestation case. He said he was in prison himself then, so he couldn't tell much about it, other than he didn't believe his brother was capable of it. California prisons, however, did confirm that in 1987, matching the time frame Danielle gave me, the boyfriend was given a 3-year prison sentence for a felony sex crime involving a child. He served only about a year of that sentence before being paroled. Over the years, he went back to prison several times for drug charges.
It was difficult because we lived through the same trauma, but we didn't. I was too little. I don't remember any of it.
But Yvette could remember, and she'd never be able to forget.
I have a 15-year-old daughter, and I can't imagine when she was 10. I remember thinking, this is the age that my sister was, when her innocence was gone, and it's unfathomable.
After dealing with years of being raped as a child, life was never the same.
It was hard growing up because she always had a resentment towards my mom. She accused her of knowing and allowing it. And of course, my mom denied it. And then it was well, you should have known. If you didn't know, if you really didn't know, you should have known. How did you not know every single day he was doing this to me? How did you not know?
When Yvette was a teenager, the turmoil in the home became unbearable. She moved out, and at 16, she started building her own family, giving birth to a son.
She loved being a mom to him. I think through all the trauma and the pain and my mom not helping her through any of it, that she just wanted to love someone and someone to love her. And I think she found that within her children. And she was good for several years.
She eventually had 3 more children. Life wasn't perfect. She was still self-medicating, but she didn't turn to hard drugs, meth, until 2004. That's when everything changed.
I still saw the kind, sweet-hearted, giving person, but that's when she just stopped caring and stopped trying. And those drugs just had a power over her, and she lost her kids.
The children were taken in by their fathers.
Her oldest daughter has had the hardest time with it. And when I try to explain to her who her mom was, it still reverts back to but she loved drugs more than me. And I don't have the right words to explain it to her.
But Danielle knows that's not true. For most of her life, being a mother was all Yvette felt she had in this world. It was her identity. Having her children stripped away from her made her feel like she had nothing. She'd get clean, but would eventually resort back to using. And then she got pregnant with a 5th baby, a baby she'd never get to know, as the child was taken from her at birth because of her documented history with drug use. However, Danielle says no one, including Child Protective Services, ever thought Yvette was abusive or neglectful, but her drug use was an undeniable issue. By February 2011, Yvette was arrested for being in possession of drugs, and for the first time in her life, when she was in trouble, she called her sister and begged for help. She confessed she'd concealed a 6th pregnancy from her sister and had given birth in jail. She needed to be bailed out so she could be with her baby. Danielle was shocked, but Yvette's explanation was the same it'd been since her first baby at age 16.
I just wanted a baby so bad. I just wanted someone to love me, and I was planning on leaving to Arizona. She knew any kid that she would have. She was red flagged by that point because she'd had her kids taken away. She knew when she gave birth that they would take the baby. So she said, I was trying to leave to Arizona. I just didn't make it in time. She gave birth premature in Lerdo. So we bailed her out. She got into programs. She was doing everything she could to get the baby back.
Court records show the county dropped all drug charges against Yvette within a few weeks of her being out. A testament to her persistence to change so she could once again be a mom. Yvette's baby was in the NICU because the infant was born premature, so the NICU was where the now sober Yvette spent all her time in early 2011.
Walked to the hospital every single day, and I couldn't take her because I was at work, but I'd take her in the evenings and I'd go see the baby, and she was clean and she was doing good, and she'd go multiple times throughout the day for feedings and back and forth, and walk there, take the bus, whatever it took. She was there, and she was so happy, and she was proud of herself because she's like, I'm doing good. Like, I've tested clean. She tested clean all these months.
And then one day, something went wrong.
I don't know exactly what happened. She missed an appointment or something happened, and the worker said she wasn't going to get the baby. And that was it. She went back to using, got really bad, really fast.
It may have been a small error, all it took for social workers to decide the baby was better off being adopted. I've seen it happen before. When it comes to a baby, perhaps rightfully so, the system wants to be extra cautious. Danielle says losing the baby sent Yvette off the deep end. Yvette began living at the El Morocco Motel, which was located in a rough part of town. It's since been demolished and is now an empty dirt lot. But when it was still standing, it was a place no one really wanted to stay, certainly not live there. But it was cheaper living than renting an apartment. Within a few months of Yvette becoming a resident there, Danielle got a knock at her door. It was Sunday, November 13th, close to 9 p.m.
They told me that they had found her body, that this was a homicide investigation. It was like my head just started ringing and spinning, and I never would have in a million years imagined or fathomed that somebody would take her life.
Danielle couldn't begin to process what was happening, but when law enforcement and coroner's investigators explained they didn't have any suspects, she blurted out this.
I remember saying, I know who did it. I know who's responsible for her death. And my mom turned to me and said, who? Your ex-boyfriend. He's responsible for her death. No, maybe not directly, but indirectly he is. Because of what he did to her. She turned to drugs. She turned to living in the motel. And she was in the predicament that she was in because of what he did to her. I truly believe if she didn't have that experience, that her life would have been different. She loved teaching the kids in Sunday school. I think she would have been a great teacher. Who knows what she would have been.
A life stolen, in some ways, long before Yvette took her last breath. But at that moment, Yvette's family knew there was a real killer out there, an evil no one could see coming.
I just remember running down the street. I got about halfway down the block and I fell to my knees. And I just cried and cried and cried because I had to be strong. I couldn't cry in front of my mom. I couldn't cry in front of my kids. And then I got back up and I ran back to the house and I told my boyfriend, take me to the hotel. Take me now. And I got there and everything was gone. There wasn't any more police or media or anything. I just wanted be near her or near where her spirit was. Just immediately, just the emptiness inside that'll never be fulfilled.
Danielle was immediately thrust into planning the funeral, which was the beginning of a glimpse into how horrific Yvette's death really was.
I just wanted to be in the same room with her, and I wanted to see her. And then somebody came and knocked on the door, and they called the funeral director out, and they came back and told me that they're sorry, but that I can't see her, and that because of the severity of everything and how long she had been there, that she'd have to be cremated. And I asked him, okay, but can I still see her? He told me no. I said, okay, but you're still bringing her though. Like, I could at least be in the same building as her body. And they said that she was decomposed so bad that they couldn't bring her into the funeral home, that they had to take her straight to be cremated. And that hurt because I just wanted, even if I didn't get to see her, even if she was in the next room, I just wanted to be in the same building as her one last time. And she always had long, beautiful hair. I mean, past her butt, long, beautiful. And this may sound weird, but I think I was just grasping to anything I had to ask, like, can I have a lock of her hair? They said they would look into it. And then when they got back to me, they said there was too much blood. They couldn't even save any of her hair.
Haunted by what happened in that motel room, not knowing who was responsible created a harrowing pain she hoped would lessen, even just slightly once a suspect was found. She didn't have to wait for long. Within a few days of the death notification, a detective called Danielle with a question.
He said, do you know anybody who has facial tattoos? I'm like, no, I don't know one single person who has facial tattoos. And does your sister know anybody who has facial tattoos? He said, not that she's ever introduced me to, not that I've ever seen her with, or not that I'm aware of, no.
When it suddenly blared on the news that police had an arrest warrant for Jamie Osuna for Yvette's murder, those questions made sense. But there was no sense of relief. Nothing like it.
I was in disbelief. Tattoos don't bother me. People with tattoos, it's self-expression. But my sister was afraid of clowns. And to know that his face tattooed like a clown is the last thing she's seen is something that's always haunted me.
And when she saw Osuna for the first time in person,
she wasn't violent, she wasn't aggressive, but she was strong and she stood up for herself. And seeing Osuna in court, I looked at my mom and I looked around and I was just like, there's no way. She could have fought him off. He's tiny. The only conclusion I have to that is that she did have blunt force trauma to the back of her head. So he had to have caught her off guard, knocked her out, and overpowered her that way. But it was just so hard to believe that someone of his stature could do the things that he did.
Yvette's autopsy wasn't completed until 8 months after her death, and the results were unclear and awful. Usually, if someone's manner of death is homicide, the cause is a gunshot wound or strangulation, stab wounds, etc. Yvette's homicide listed several different causes.
I only imagined that what was in court was going to be 100 times worse. And it was. When we went to the preliminary, Andrea Kohler, who was the original DA on the case, had told me that we're going to show some pictures. And I'm just letting you know. That way you could look away if you want. And I said, if she endured it, I could at least look. Like, I felt like I had to. I felt like I had to see. Because how's a picture going to hurt me if she physically went through it? And all I saw was one picture. And I don't even know what I was looking at. It just looked like hamburger meat. And that was enough. Like, I didn't need to see anything else. I knew then that she wouldn't want me to go through that, and I was just trying to be too strong.
From then on, she asked investigators only one question about her sister's case.
I don't know why, but something kept asking me to ask if he raped her. And when they confirmed that she was sexually assaulted, I really wish that I didn't know that, because it brought me back to the trauma that started this all.
I want you to take a step back for a moment and try to imagine going through what Danielle and the rest of Yvette's family were experiencing at the time. Then try to take into account that the court case stretched on for years, constant hearings where Jamie Osuna would stare them dead in the eye as they were told it'd be another 6 months, another year before a trial. Then try to imagine this: your loved one brutally murdered by a stranger, and being told, warned really, that your murdered loved one would more or less be torn apart during the trial. I saw glimpses of this during Osuna's police interrogation following his arrest. Osuna was quick to say while he didn't know Yvette, it seemed clear she was a drug user. So who knows the type of company she kept? He also tried to insinuate that if his DNA was found, it's because they had consensual sex. It's always insulting to hear, but something we constantly see with suspects accused of murder where victims were sexually assaulted. Yvette's murder was a death penalty case, and it was going to be a long, brutal trial. And in some ways, Yvette was going to be as much on trial as Osuna. But the Peña family was determined to see it through until a jury read a guilty verdict. But then, 6 long years after the murder, on that Monday in March, the first day of the trial, attorneys on both sides learned my secret. I had the recorded interview that could bust the case wide open. Sure, it wasn't the first time Osuna had made incriminating comments or even flat out confessed to Yvette's murder. But it was the first time a confession from him was this detailed and on tape. You may recall I unexpectedly got the bizarre jailhouse interview 3 days earlier where he admitted to everything he was accused of and then some. And Osuna told me he wanted to plead guilty. There was just one problem. California courts won't let a defendant plead guilty in a death penalty case. If death were waived, Osuna would be able to enter a guilty plea and end it all. Danielle was aware of this before, but that Monday she made a decision and went to prosecutor Nick Lackey with a question.
And I just said, you know what, Nick, I've done my research. I've done my research on the death penalty. I've done my research on the life without the possibility of parole. I've looked into as far as what his type of living environment would be. And I said, I think I've been through enough and I don't want to go through anymore. And I don't want to put my family through anymore. And if you could promise me that he's never going to get out, then why are we going to do this? Why am I going to sit in court and hear everything that he did to her that I still don't know to this day and hear it justified? I can't go through that. I don't want to do that.
And when the plea deal was made official, there was just one last thing to do: formally sentence Jamie Osuna and send him off to prison. As prosecutor Nick Lackey began looking at the calendar to set the date, Danielle had an idea. She asked if the sentencing could be on May 15th, 2017, what would have been Yvette Peña's 42nd birthday. All attorneys and the judge agreed.
This is for you, sister. Happy birthday. We did it. We got you justice. And that's why I cried. That's why I cried in the hallway. And I remember you being there and the other news stations and the newspaper. And I just didn't care. I didn't care who was around. And I remember as soon as I stopped crying, I'm like, these are happy tears. These are happy tears. And I remember looking at my boyfriend and he had this look on his face, like pure shock. And I said, what happened? He said, every single photojournalist put their camera to the ground. Not one of them recorded that. And that meant so much to me because I was so vulnerable. That would have made beautiful coverage. And I'm just so glad that every station that was there respected that moment.
It's so hard to put into words the pain that Jamie Osuna has inflicted on Yvette Peña's family and the ripple effect the murder continues to have. But recently I spoke with Yvette Peña's oldest daughter, Melissa, and being in her presence gave me a glimpse into what this family has to endure every day. Today, Melissa is 21 years old and a striking young woman.
My last memory of her, we were in the backyard and she was holding me in her lap and she was singing to me.
It's been nearly 8 years since her father had to tell her at age 13 that her mom was gone.
You look so much like your mom. Does everyone tell you that?
Yes.
And do you like hearing that?
Yes. Yeah, I do, but because it's like, oh, I'm beautiful, but it sucks that I'm just a memory, just a look. I think about her often, every day. Some days more than others. Since my mom passed. No, since my mom was murdered. I have this envy in me. And I envy people with moms. Like when I see a girl and her mom, or like if I go get my nails done, and like the other day I went and this girl and her mom were in there and they were picking out nail colors, and then I got so mad I just walked out. I can't have that. I can't ever look at my phone and see my mom's calling. When I need a mom, I don't have that. I forgot what my mom's voice sounded like. How sad is that? Could you imagine not remembering which mom's voice sounds like? Or having to look at pictures of your mom because you forget exactly how her smile was lined up with her face. I don't know what my mom even smells like anymore.
It can be so easy for all of us, reporters, law enforcement, the general public, to not think about how a murder will affect victims' loved ones in the little ways. We don't think about it being difficult for the child of a murder victim years and years later to watch another mom and daughter together in public. But that's the reality. This is the reality of what Osuna took from Yvette's family. Sitting here with Melissa is a reminder of that.
For no reason, she didn't even do anything. It's just because he was evil and he just wanted to kill her because he had a chance. She didn't see me graduate. She wasn't there when my son was born. She'll never be able to meet him. She won't be there for me at my wedding. Not because she didn't want to, but because he took her from me. And it was all because he just felt like it.
It's really hard to look at Yvette's loved ones and not be able to give them a better explanation for why Jamie Osuna killed Yvette, which I know sounds wrong because there is no good reason to take another life. Would it make them feel better to know she was killed because Osuna wanted to rob her, or because they'd been in a relationship and Osuna killed her in the heat of the moment? I don't know. But knowing Yvette's daughter has to live with the explanation that Osuna killed Yvette Peña simply because he could, and he wanted to, is difficult to accept. But that's exactly what the Peña family has done. Danielle used to contemplate visiting Osuna in jail to try to get answers, but she's accepted now there are no answers that will help her healing. That's something I think most would agree with. At the end of the day, there's no way to really understand Yvette's murder, but I look at it like this. When Osuna entered Yvette's motel room that November night, the two were strangers who were once both wounded children, born into complicated families with young, perhaps ill-prepared mothers who had difficult backgrounds themselves. These two strangers grew up in a rough neighborhood ridden with poverty, both with abusive men in their childhood homes, both feeling, to some extent, they didn't get the protection they needed from their own mothers. These hardships undoubtedly impacted both of them. How exactly their paths crossed as adults, no one can really say. But once the two of them were in that motel room, only one of them became a monster. And it wasn't the one who was raped repeatedly at 10 years old, thinking she was protecting her baby sister, only to later live with the harrowing guilt that she failed. Long before Yvette was murdered by Osuna, she was plagued by the need to feel loved. It seems Osuna was consumed by something very different, hate, and it led him to Yvette's door and somehow made him feel he had the right to torture her and take her life, and never once show a glimmer of remorse. Yvette's daughter, Melissa, recalls the first and only time she saw Osuna in person, on Yvette's birthday at Osuna's sentencing.
He sat up and then he just looked at me and he just smiled, and I felt like he locked eyes on me so fast because I look like my mom, but he just smiled and he waved.
In the 2 years since Osuna went to prison, Melissa has graduated high school and enrolled in college where she's studying to become a dental hygienist. She's worked hard to make a good life for herself and her young son. She hasn't let her mother's murder derail her, something that wasn't always easy.
When I first found out and I started doing bad, I wanted to be with my mom. I wanted to end my life just to be with my mom.
But ultimately, she knew that was the last thing her mother Yvette would have wanted. And Melissa still finds ways to keep her mother's spirit alive. She had Yvette's urn at her high school graduation, and when she's having a particularly hard day, she'll talk to her mother's urn for hours. It means a lot to her to feel that even if her mother can't answer her, she's still listening.
Do you realize how strong you are, that you haven't let him completely destroy your life?
I guess I never looked at it like that.
I look at it like that. And when I look at Yvette's baby sister Danielle and everything she's done in her life, it's truly incredible. Danielle has been a guidance counselor for people struggling with substance abuse for many years, and in her free time, she volunteers as a victim's advocate, helping families of murdered loved ones. I've always wanted to learn from her how she's been able to endure all she has and never let her tragedies or Osuna win.
I'm not a fool. We live in a very ugly world. There's ugly things that happen every minute of the day. Unfortunately, one of those minutes hit close to home. And in the beginning, the first few weeks, I felt that. I felt like I was losing myself. I couldn't get dressed. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. So I held it all in. After the sentencing, I finally said, I'm ready. I'm ready to deal with this. I'm going to go to therapy now. And I made it to one session and I lost it. And I don't even think I said anything in therapy. I just broke down and snot everywhere and tears everywhere. And I haven't gone back because it's too hard. It's too hard and I don't know how to deal with it. I don't know how to process this loss. All I know is What's got me by is wanting to make my sister proud and knowing that she's looking down on me and doesn't want me to hurt and wants me to be successful. And like I said, there's a lot of things that I do in honor of her.
Danielle doesn't seem to think she has it all figured out the way I think she does, but she does offer this advice.
She's in our home. She's in our lives. My advice to families going through this would just be, don't give up and don't lose yourself. And by all means, don't give him or her the benefit of hurting you or letting you see you hurt. Because with Osuna, that would have just boosted his ego even more.
Over the years, I've felt this sense of guilt whenever I report on Osuna, whenever I contribute to keeping him in the spotlight. Though Danielle has always been nothing but kind, finding the silver lining, in a way, of her sister's killer getting notoriety.
In the end, everything turned out the way that it was supposed to. You wouldn't have got the story or the information that you got, which can possibly lead to cracking other unsolved cases, whether he's responsible for them or not. I think everything happened when it was supposed to happen.
There is potentially important information I got from that 2017 jailhouse interview with Osuna. He opened up about how his mind works, how someone seemingly so evil sees the world, and other unsolved murders he could be responsible for. That's next time on The Man with 1,000 Faces. The Man with 1,000 Faces is written and reported by me, Olivia Lavois. Maricel Maldonado is our editor and sound mixer. Patricia Rocha is our executive producer. Michael Trihey is our news director. For photos and bonus content, go to 1000facespodcast.com. Copyright Nexstar Media Group, Incorporated. If you like this story, please check out another project of ours, one we call Murdered and Forgotten. Our focus is identifying two Jane Does, both brutally murdered in 1980. We know who the killer is, but this story isn't over until we know who the victims are and can bring them home to their families. There are so many clues. Please go to murderedandforgotten.com.